Hello, my friends, and welcome to Secret Transmissions. I'm Fulcrum. You can also call me Nick. And I'm excited about today's episode because I think it's going to get super nerdy and super fun. We have two special guests who are specialists in their field, and I'd like to bring them both out. I'm just going to pop them both on here. We have Element 7 and Sawyeurism.
How's it going?
Oh, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good. These Bad Batch Mando 2 in 1 day are starting to exhaust me. I'm looking forward to Bad Batch being done next.
Well, for Dyad, we're also filming for Supernatural, so Tuesdays is very heavy on filming. It's Supernatural, Mandalorian, and then Bad Batch afterwards.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Sawyer, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks.
And welcome. We've been on the same podcast, I think, but this is our first time really getting to talk, which is nice. I'm always seeing you on your videos. But I'm happy that you're here. I know. Before we get started with everything, first of all, Master Chief Productions, Margot, Julie, good to see you in the chat. Element, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on TikTok at _element7__gang.
All the underscores.
Absolutely. I couldn't find Element 7 just by itself. So that's on Twitter as well. And then I believe on Instagram, it's an extra underscore at the end. So it's __. Hey, but on YouTube, you can find me at Dyad in the Force.
Dyad in the Force. And yeah. And of course, you do all the reaction videos, but also you have your podcast on Saturdays.
Yes. Saturdays at 5 p.m. Pacific with Darth Chaco.
Yeah. And we had Chaco on for those of you saw the very first episode. Sawyer, what about you? Where are you in the webosphere?
I don't have any underscores or crazy things like that. I got super lucky. You can find me on every social media platform at Sawyeurism. Even YouTube. I just don't post anything there.
Her name is Sawyer with a U, by the way.
No, it's not. Oh my god. Yes, Sawyeurism is well, I mean, I might as well, since you said there's no policies on your channel yet. It comes from, people ask me where I get it. A friend of mine, a former friend of mine, once told me that I should make an Instagram account called Sawyeurism and post voyeur photos on it. And that was where the name came from. That's why there's a U in the name. But people all the time message me like, "Hey, Sawyer," and with the U. There's no U in Sawyer. It's just my name. It's just.
I mean, you know, as far as policy is concerned, like I'm tied into like burlesque world and everything else. So like I'm. Yeah, and a lot of my people here are a bunch of dancers too. We've heard and seen it all. I know.
You never know. I mean, you never know who's listening. You never know. I don't tell that story all the time. I remember when I first told it to Chaco, and he was like I was live on his podcast, and we didn't know each other very well, and he was like, "Oh, okay."
You mean it wasn't immediately apparent that it was based off of voyeurism?
A lot of people think it's Sawyeurisms. So.
When you say it out loud, when you just look at it written, it's one thing, but when you say it out loud, then you know. Yeah. So, of course, our topic today, which I mentioned before, is science and fiction. Of course, Star Wars being known for sci-fi and fantasy, we have, of course, two specialists here. We've got our lore master and we've got our scientist. Of course, they both know more about Star Wars than I could ever dream. But you know, that's why they're on. So to get started, Element, when it comes to being a lore master, what does that entail?
So I've been getting that question a lot lately, over the past year. A lore master is someone who's dedicated to the lore, dedicated to always learning about it. And Star Wars is an ever evolving piece of lore that continues to update itself. Whereas, like, if there was like I don't want to say dead, if there's like an antiquated or artifact piece of literature, then that would make you a master of lore. So, for example, if you are referring to like Tolkien's Legendarium, all of the works are out there. If you want to learn about all of the works, then you would be a master of his Legendarium or master of his lore. But for Star Wars, it's still a franchise that is still updating, so lore master seems to be more applicable. All you want to do is just dedicate yourself to a certain continuity or both, and remain vigilant in updating it and sharing it and making sure that everyone understands it. And that's the extent of being a lore master.
I never want to be a lore master. That's more responsibility than I want. I want to be able to say things, and
it's been more important these days than it has been in the past, because lots of people getting it wrong for the wrong reasons, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we have people that like just don't know, and that's the other part of being a lore master, is like, hey, we'll share this info with you and we'll help everybody learn about it. But if some people, I don't want to name names, get it wrong purposefully, or not even purposefully, just in spite of something, then we have to be vigilant in that area too.
Sawyer, you've taken the kind of specialist route of being kind of the Star Wars scientist with that. Could you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, I used to use the term lore master. I choose not to anymore, much to Element's chagrin. But I specialize in. It used to be my like area of expertise. I kind of centered in on like the Old Republic, which I still am very passionate about, and especially with all this Mandalorian stuff, I've been like making more Old Republic content again, and I'm excited to do that after the stream. But my trade, I'm a scientist, and a lot of people don't realize that. I started doing these like Star Wars biology videos last year, and people were like, "Oh, that's so cool! Like nobody's doing this, whatever." Which is not true. There was a guy, I think his name was Matty the Archivist, and he would do like Star Wars biology. So I wasn't the first, but I'm actually a biologist. That's my trade. That's what I actually do in my real life. And so I was like, I can do a spin on this. I can make this, So that's what I do. But people call me the Star Wars biologist now, which I think is a great honor to be referred to as such. So, and now I'm just having a lot of fun with exploring scientific questions and relating them back to research that's currently going on in our world, or research that has gone on in our world. Yesterday, I made some ties to some of the cloning conversations we've had in recent Star Wars media, and how that is very similar to the progression of cloning research in the real world. So, yeah, that's what I'm about, and I love it. It's awesome. I actually sorry, I talk a lot on podcasts. I mentioned it in my grad school applications. My mentor said, "Hey, this is a really cool thing you do, and you know how to command an audience. So put it out there, man." And in one of my interviews, I actually was able to talk about it. So it's been really cool.
Other people think it's cool too.
I mean, you say much to my chagrin, but I consider anybody who's learning the lore and enthusiastic about it a lore master. There's a stigma around the term where people get either imposter syndrome or don't think they're worthy of it, but it is simply a self-dedication. One example recently that I'm about to do a video on is an article on Screen Rant claiming that The Mandalorian is retconning The Rise of Skywalker because they didn't know Palpatine was already a Strandcast. So, it's stuff like that we have to be vigilant about. But I think Sawyer is just as much a lore master as I am, and even you, Nick.
I definitely try to get it right and try to read up and study and like look something up when I'm going to talk about a topic. Every once in a while, I'll get it wrong, but then try to switch gears. But I will say, diving in and being able to kind of learn and explore, like it's a fun little rabbit hole to go down. But there's just so much now. Uh, it's hard to kind of sometimes keep up with it, like all the books and everything coming out. There's some of the kind of canon books. I know Element that you've kind of promoted some of the books that I actually need to get and read up on, but I just don't want the pressure of being a lore master. But I know just by being a Star Wars like kind of influencer and creator, people are going to look to you. So I'd rather get the information right than speak out of my butt.
That is true. There's a lot of pressure, especially from the people who love to do trivia. They're like when I first got started in this game, everyone thought I knew everything about Star Wars. Um, I mean, I know more than the average person, and when we participated in our first trivia tournament, it's like, yeah, I did well, but like you compare me to like the people who competed on like the Schmodown, Andrew DeMolanta and Alex Damon. They those are trivia guys. They know a lot of trivia. If you were to ask me who played like the third handmaiden to Natalie Portman in the prequels, I wouldn't know it. And that's the thing. Like, there's the difference between a lore master and someone who knows everything about Star Wars is just like it's not about what you know, it's about what you can recall at the moment. And if I were to put myself up against anybody who's just like just all in on trivia, I wouldn't stand a chance.
Oh, no, me neither. Like that, it's too much pressure. Like in the moment, I'm just going to forget every name that there is. Of course, this is the perfect setup for Sawyer. You have a trivia thing going on.
The previous comment, it took me a while to understand what it was. I should have started with who said it. That's Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. He's also the admin of my Discord server, and he helped me prepare for my grad school interviews. Thank you, Lewis.
I understand that now. Okay.
Yeah. But yes, I am hosting a Star Wars trivia tournament. That's something I always wanted to do, and then people have been asking me to do it for a while, and an opportunity presented itself, and I was like, oh, okay, like I'll gauge some interest, and like 80 people were interested, and I was like, oh okay, we better do this. So yeah, it's not gonna be easy, but I still encourage anybody who's interested to give it a shot. There is a qualifier exam. It shouldn't be an exam because it's fun, but she is winning the trivia tournament. I will bet my money right now. She is the only person who has a perfect score right now. But yeah, so you should sign up. The deadline is March 31st, and then if you pass through the next round, you'll get an email shortly and with more details. And Element 7 has so graciously offered to donate one of our prizes, and I think it's going to be a really great, awesome community event. So really looking forward to it.
Can you remind me where they go to actually?
Oh, right. Sorry. If you follow me, I have a link tree in pretty much Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or if you're in my Discord server, links there. Or just track me down and message me, and I'll send it to you. I have my worst.
Just go full stalker mode. Just
no, it's true. My worst influencer habit is I will answer anybody's message, which leads to some bad rabbit holes. But you DM me, I will answer.
I wouldn't consider that a bad habit. I think that your worst habit is not getting like a Bitly link or for this exam. I'll talk to you about setting yourself up with like a Sawyer's exam short URL so that you can put people to it. Or I could even put it on diadintheforce.com/Sawyer if you want.
Thank you.
If it was multiple choice, I'd no problem. But like just remembering answers, I'm terrible. But I'm looking forward to seeing some like amazing people like Crystal just having at it.
Well, Nick,
Yeah.
it is there are 31 multiple choice, and you would only need to get one written response correctly in order to pass.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think you could do it.
All right. Okay. Multiple choice. I'm in now. You had me in multiple choice, and I just have to remember that off the top of my head. It's like when somebody asks you what somebody's name is. That's just as soon as that happens, it's kind of like no idea.
I like the name game on here.
Yeah. So let's dive in for a little bit of lore first. This question goes to both of you. When it comes to lore, what is the topic that most frustrates you in having to talk about or bring up? We'll get into what your favorite one is, but
I'll let Sawyer answer.
Oh my gosh.
We'll answer for each other, okay? You ready to answer for me? I'm ready to answer for you.
I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know. I could get this wrong. For you, I would say it's Grey Jedi or the balance of the Force.
Yeah. And for you, I'd say this is a Legends concept. The fact that this one Sith can eat planets, but he can't. And Sawyer's tired of running into fanboys who are like, nihilist, eat planets.
Pat can attest to this. A couple weeks ago, I was like, I'm very single and I'm staying that way, but sometimes for entertainment, I go on dating apps to argue about Star Wars with men because they think that they know more than me. And this guy, unironically, like he messaged me and he was like, who's your favorite Sith Lord? Mine's Darth Nihilus. And I was like,
oh no.
Oh man.
Yep.
So I will say, if you had a show where you specifically, like, the only thing was you went on these like little dating apps and these dates with people just to argue Star Wars, that would be an amazing show. I would
awesome.
Watch every single episode of that.
I could it could certainly be a Twitter series. I want to put out a disclaimer. I don't go looking for that specifically. I have a voice note that says that I think that Anakin is fully responsible for all of his actions, and that spawns every single day at least 5 men trying to tell me why I'm wrong about that. And boy, it's fun.
But that would be a great show. I'm telling you, I would watch it. Like, if there are any TV executives out there, contact Sawyer, and you're in for some good entertainment.
I do want to say I don't want to drag anybody that just isn't in the know about the lore of these characters or the lore of Star Wars, but it is frustrating when these people they surf Wikipedia and think that they know the whole story, and we run into it a lot when we meet gatekeepers, where they would say, "Oh, you're a fan of Star Wars. Do you even know who Darth Revan is?" And my favorite thing is to ask them, "Do you?" Because a lot of times these edgelords who love the mask and the purple red lightsaber mix is just like, yo, that's like the most powerful Sith ever. And they will bow at the feet of Darth Revan, don't even know that he spent most of his life as a Jedi, and only know Darth Revan. They don't know Jedi Knight Revan and his whole story. And that leads into the Great Jedi thing, because purple and red lightsaber go burr. He's obviously a Great Jedi, but again, they don't know the story. And I will say it's frustrating to talk about the balance in the Force, but I don't blame fans for this, because George was very convoluted with it. He wanted to create a system where, for kids, because Star Wars is for kids, you had a clear bad guy, evil guy, bad guy, good guy dichotomy, and so you have the light side and the dark side. The problem is, as adults, we rarely see the world as a binary system like that. We see in Greys, a lot of people want to be a Grey Jedi. The problem is, lore-wise, in Star Wars, everything in between being a good person to maybe an edgy person, you're on the light. Based on George's system. If you're a killer, if you have all of these really dark tendencies, you're on the dark side. And so when we talk about people being on the light and they want to go towards the Sith side of things, it's an extreme. You know, if you want to be like chaotic neutral or something like that, if we're talking about D&D, you're still on the light. You know, based on Star Wars lore. And so I don't blame people for getting it wrong. I do blame people for saying that the Jedi are evil.
Oh, jeez, that has been going around so much this year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's you know it comes down to something very simple. Not everyone's perfect. The Jedi are flawed. They have their faults and they made mistakes. But it is not to say that they are, for example, they are the everything that the Sith say about the Jedi are true. When it's the Sith are twisting things, you know. People say Jedi kidnap children. The only people who kidnap children are the Sith. So, and we see the Sith doing it in the Clone Wars.
I mean, the Sith are the ultimate like gaslighters.
They are.
They're great at that. Years ago, I used to think Grey Jedi were a thing until I like explored things more. But that was when I was just like, I just kind of mostly knew the movies from back in the day, and then exploring things more, it's like, oh no, that's ridiculous. What was I thinking?
And I mean, like when we're talking about Grey Jedi in the sense that, you know, a Jedi, there are a good deal of people who use that phrase to describe how Qui-Gon was described as gray and how Jolie Bindo describes himself as kind of gray, like, you know, not in agreement with the council, not in agreement with necessarily the teachings of the Jedi. Like, there are plenty of examples of that in canon and in Legends, and that's totally a valid perspective for a Jedi to have. And there are situations, now we have Wayseekers in the High Republic, and that is essentially, in my opinion, a gray Jedi, in the sense that is, you know, if somebody's going to come at me with like the Gray Jedi Code, I'm going to be like, slow down, buddy. But actually, here, let me give you some. Does this sound like what you're talking about? Because this is a thing. But I don't know. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and
yeah, I mean, including the Gray Jedi Code. That's never been a thing.
That doesn't exist.
To that I will say, I think the one thing that we need to be vigilant about is Qui-Gon's been described as gray, but the truth of it all, including Jolie Bindo, is that they both serve the light.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gray nature of their mode of operation is more around their not morality. They're more around their view of the world. And so Wayseeker, I often encourage people to go down the Wayseeker route more, simply because it helps you see the duality of the light and the dark. There is something in the middle. It's not gray. It's just the middle. It's apathy. It's the Bendu.
All right.
Sorry, that's a lot.
No.
This
It's
is
great.
a terrible combination for you to put on your podcast on the same day.
No. So you know, a lot of people on here, like, it's be able to kind of like specialize, get into these kind of like nerdy kind of conversations. It's great. Like having this science and fiction topic. Like I kind of want to like have us like go a little deep on all of this, because I find a lot of times, like when we talk, sometimes we kind of talk above the surface of things versus really getting into some of the nitty gritty topics, which I love. I find interesting. Let's sidetrack for a moment and go to the science side of things. So because you just mentioned that you did a video about cloning, which of course you just did that in the last couple of days, right? So people can go and look at like the video and share everything. But can you talk to us about a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, you know, sometimes I get lucky and somebody reaches out to me and asks me a question. Like the other day, it was, how did Boba Fett survive? Why didn't he get suffocated in the Sarlacc pit? And I'm like, oh, great, excellent. I can do a video on that. Thank you. But sometimes I get really stuck And so I asked some people yesterday if they had any questions that they wanted answered about, science, and they brought up things that have been happening in The Mandalorian recently, and we've also gotten a little bit of that in this season of The Bad Batch, and just ever since, I think, The Rise of Skywalker, there's been a lot more discussion about cloning and the implications of that and the possibilities surrounding cloning in the Star Wars universe, because it was already more technologically advanced than it probably ever will be in the real world with the Kaminoans. But then you add this whole aspect of trying to make a force-sensitive clone, and that doesn't work. And so how can we cheat our way around that? And that's kind of what the current lore is exploring. So I was thinking about it a lot yesterday, and I realized that even though it is far more advanced in Star Wars and far more sci-fi, the kind of, and this is, I would say this is relatively true for the technology we see in general in Star Wars. It is informed by our reality, which is the case with a lot of continuous sci-fi projects. But I was just thinking about the fact that, okay, the first thing, the Kaminoans, they cloned the army. They were doing what we know to be, embryonic cloning, single-strand DNA. That's what we can do. That's what Dolly the sheep was. Now what are we doing in the real world? What are we trying to do with clones? We're trying to combine organisms to make organs for organ transplants. That is what the current research in cloning is. There's also some nonsense cloning going on right now with let's make a woolly mammoth, which is stupid and I don't condone it. But the more present and more important research in cloning right now is how can we combine the DNA of pigs and humans to make organs that we can use for transplants. And so that is something we're struggling with, right? Because we, I don't know how familiar everybody is with organ transplant in general, but when you do it from human to human, there's a lot of struggle with rejecting the body, rejecting it, and is the blood type the same, and is this the same, whatever. And in The Mandalorian, last week, can I talk about last week? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, that should be fine, everybody. Yeah.
It's just a slight, in Dr. Pershing's speech, there's one sentence where he says, okay, my research, I want to combine different strands of DNA from multiple organisms. And then after his speech, he mentioned something about the casts, which we know are Snoke and the Strand casts and Palpatine's final body. And he talks about the fact that it was a struggle for him because just like in the real world, that science, it does not work. You gotta tinker with it a lot. So I thought it was really interesting that even though it's all big high tech, we can make a whole army at the drop of a hat of human beings. We can't do that. But both the scientists in the Star Wars universe and the ones in real life are struggling to combine DNA for cloning right now. So long story short, I thought that was really interesting, and that's kind of the angle that I took it yesterday.
Awesome. And by the way, anybody that has questions for these two as we're going forward, by all means, they are specialists today, so throw them out there. Going back to both of you, what is your favorite lore topic? Or at least your current favorite lore topic? That could always change. I know that's even harder than your least favorite.
The thing is the most frustrating topic usually is the most enjoyable thing to talk about. When it comes from a place of people saying, oh, balance in the force is equal number Jedi, equal number Sith, then you're frustrated in how does this equate? But if you're truly having a conversation with someone who is interested in actually learning what balance in the force is, it is one of my favorite things to talk about because it encompasses so many different things. It encompasses morality. It encompasses, how the cycle of the force from life to death to new life is an essential part of the galaxy. I think a lot of people, when George Lucas in his writer's room, and you see these in the interviews and the behind the scenes takes on the DVDs, when he says balance is the light, people are like, wait a minute, why? How does that doesn't work on a scale? But like, balance to George has never been a scale. It's always been a measure of equilibrium, or even though equilibrium is like a balance thing on a scale too. It's always been like the flow of the force. Is it free? You always hear people talking about let it flow through you, and the our best analogy is that the force is a river, and I know someone at Lucasfilm is watching Chaco and I's videos, because in the latest book, Anakin says to Luke, "The force is a river, my son, and the dark side seeks to change its current." And I'm just like, someone's watching us, and again, it was again in one of the shows. I forget. We watched something, and someone was describing it as a river again, and we were just so enthralled and proud that interpretation was being canonized. But it is free flowing. The Jedi build watermills. The Force is its ally. They will compel it to help them in their needs. The Sith build dams. They're like, no, let's keep it right here. I'm gonna bend its current, and I'm gonna stop its flow and dominate it. So
I mean, water's always a great analogy, because like when you're talking about the cosmic force versus the living force, like the water cycle is kind of a easier reference to kind of understand how that all kind of flows together with that. You got a another one that always comes up.
The EU is never canon. There's more evidence to support that it was never canon than there is to say it was. The one thing that people often get incorrect is the canon tier list that Leland Chi had for the old expanded universe, where they had like G canon, T canon, S canon. Those weren't levels of canon; they were separate canons. So you had G canon, which was George Lucas's movie universe, and you had like comics and books that was like, I think, S canon. Those are separate, but based off of the G canon. So they would take the G canon, they would expand out from there. That was a separate canon. And then you had your T canon, which was like your television shows and your cartoons and stuff like that, also based off of George Lucas's canon, but another universe there. So it was like a multiversal thing, and you can find this on the EU Reader's Companion Guide. It'll tell you, it's like, yeah, all of this stuff is based off of George Lucas's stuff, but those are all different worlds, and George doesn't consider them to be part of his canon. So they never were canon. They're great stuff in there in the EU. My favorite still is the Old Republic, and there's nothing wrong with it. But as far as have they always been canon, they haven't been.
All right, Sawyer. Two-part question for you. Your favorite lore topic, 1, canon, and then 2, legends.
Canon is the High Republic. Easily, I could talk about the High Republic all day long. It can get a little frustrating trying to convert people to the High Republic, but I always say that my biggest success as an influencer has been the countless times someone has messaged me and said, I bought Light of the Jedi because of you. And I'm like, I have done my job. So yeah, I would say that. And gosh, legends, I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, I think that it is impossible to fully explore my series of science, and how it connects to real life science without going into Legends. So I might say that just because a lot of the things I want to talk about, I have to pull from Legends in order to answer those questions. Not always, like the Boba Fett Sarlacc pit, that sometimes with the biology, like it's not been confirmed in canon, but telling you that Sarlaccs have two stomachs doesn't really. I don't see why that would deeply affect canon if it was written in Legends. But I mean, yeah, I think I can't really explore the full depth of the science of Star Wars without Legends. So I would say that. I do have a very soft spot for the Old Republic, though.
I do want to address one of the comments.
Mm-hmm.
They asked what Legends book it is. The Essential Reader's Companion, Star Wars, The Essential Guides, and they do not explicitly call them canon. I can actually read from it right now. The most definitive canon of Star Wars universe is encompassed by the feature films and television productions in which George Lucas is directly involved. The movies and the Clone Wars television series are what he and his handpicked writers reference when adding cinematic adventures to Star Wars oeuvre. Sawyer could probably pronounce that.
Spell it.
Oeuvre.
Oh, like, yeah, okay. Continue.
But Lucas allows for an expanded universe that exists parallel to the one he directly oversees. In many cases, the stewards of the expanding universe, editors within the licensing division of Lucasfilm who work with authors and publishers, will ask for his input or blessing on projects. Though these stories may get his stamp of approval, they don't enter his canon unless they are depicted cinematically in one of his projects. So,
yeah, George always put the movies and TV shows as priority. If he wanted to do something different than what was written out there, he would do it and not really care.
Yeah, I mean, you can, like, this is why we have headcanons and AUs. It's like you can have your own canon, it's fine, but like if we're speaking G canon, George Lucas canon, and now that he sold it, Disney decides what is canon now. Then we have to respect those boundaries. I love Legends just as much as Sawyer does. Being canon doesn't give them more importance. It just, as lore masters, we have to know what data we're working with. So if you ask me, full potential Luke, what is his greatest feat? And I'm like, what are we talking about? Legends or canon? That's why it's important to us. We're not like asserting canon is more important than Legends at all, but we just need to know this stuff so we know what we're talking about.
All right, and of course, High Republic. I mean, that's been such a big book series, and I know there are people in here that have read it and haven't read it, but especially with the latest trailer of of Jedi Survivor, that there's some possible tie-ins there. Could you, each of you, kind of talk about the importance of what the High Republic books have brought, especially in regards to Jedi and our understanding of that? Is that too specific a question?
I'm the Sith lover. I'm waiting for you to answer before I go.
Okay. Can you repeat the question,
Alex? So when it comes to the High Republic, we have now kind of a greater understanding of Jedi in a different age, rather than the Jedi that we see in the Clone Wars and around the prequels, or like the original series where there's like a few in hiding. The Jedi that we have in the High Republic, what have we learned from them? The importance of what we've learned from them in the High Republic. What has the High Republic brought us?
Well, we learned that they lost their way, which is apparent in the prequels. I mean, even George says in his director's commentary, he's like, we're seeing the fall of the Jedi and what they did to bring about that fall, the mistakes that they made at the time. I'm trying to do like an impression. I don't know, it's not working. Um, but you see in the High Republic a Jedi Order that is more aware of itself, aware of its purpose and mission to serve the lights. You know, their entire running motto in that era is for light and life, and we see the cracks forming. You know, it's not that far from the prequels. It's 200 years, which is 232 BBY, and so you'll see the evidence of the cracks forming, where the Republic is, you know, more concerned with getting them involved with political matters, and the Jedi are discussing that in the council. They're like, oh, we're not military. We're not, you know, we're not like an occupying force. We can't be involved in the Republic. And then you go 200 years in the future, they're very much a part of the Republic, and they're working for the Senate, and they're working for the Chancellor, and they've lost that way of just existing to help people, because it didn't take the Republic scrambling the Jedi to help with the Great Disaster in the High Republic. They were already dispatched. They had their own autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we learned. The Jedi, what they used to be, what everybody refers to in the movies, you know, from A New Hope, for thousands of generations we the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. And then we see we in the prequels, it's like, you know, we're not soldiers, we're peacekeepers. And then season 7, Ahsoka is like, you know, we were supposed to be peacekeepers in the galaxy, not this. And so the High Republic is a great example of where they were, where they used to be, and what they ought to be, and not where they are, where we meet them in the prequels and onward.
Sawyer.
I mean, I think he did a pretty good job of summing it up. That's almost exactly what I would have said. I mean, I think I was somebody, and I think a lot of Star Wars fans could relate to this, that they felt a disconnect from the Jedi when all we had to really go off of an era where there were a lot of Jedi besides the Old Republic. And frankly, the Jedi in the Old Republic are not great either. They've got a lot of issues. Sorry, I know how you feel about Satele. The Order itself had their issues. And so I think there were a lot of fans like myself who went to the Sith because they were cooler and they had emotions and whatever, and they didn't, you know, whatever. But the High Republic shines a light on this true golden age of the Jedi, where they're prosperous and they're, you know, many in numbers, and they have therapy, and there is emotion. And emotion. Yeah, I mean, it gave a much different perspective to me, and I think a lot of people who felt similarly to me on the matter, a newfound appreciation for the Jedi, right? And more importantly, in my opinion, one of the, if not the greatest villain in Star Wars canon. I profess that Marchion Ro is the scariest dude. He maybe is not as like physically powerful as Palpatine, but exceptional.
You a fan? Villain. You're a fan?
I'm not a fan, like a fan, but,
no, but yeah, of the writing of
of the character and the writing of the Nihil in general, and the story that they created around it. It is prime Star Wars storytelling. I would argue it's the best thing that they have released since Disney bought the company. So you did pick the right two people to advertise the High Republic, that's for sure.
I mean, I'm all up to date on the High Republic, and I've been loving it. So
it is.
I'm also an advocate. Yeah.
If we're talking Legends, Old Republic, if we're talking canon, High Republic. I don't know what it is with me. Like further and further we get back in history, but you know what? I'm a huge fan of the Jedi, and why would I be a fan of them when they're wrong, when they're making mistakes, when there's an era of Jedi who are what they should be? You know, they're peacekeepers. They help people. They have emotions. If somebody wants to like pursue a relationship, they're like, all right, well, we'll see you later. Like you can leave and pursue that relationship. Like shout out to Midnight Horizon. That's a great story. Um,
I can't wait for the new
it's
one.
I think it's one of my favorite things to discover upon someone who's a fan of the Sith, that falling to the dark side and pursuing breaking your chains is placing yet another set of chains on you. My chains are broken. Nay, the dark side's bound me.
That's a great impression. Yeah,
It's all of the Sith ever.
Jumping tracks again. Sawyer, back to science. I know. Is there a particular, besides cloning, a particular topic or area you've explored within Star Wars that that you love, whether it comes to anywhere in science or biology? Is there the one?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun with my biology of X species series. That was a lot of fun. But I found recently, but also was kind of dipping my toes in it last year. I really, and I think this is just because this is my profession and this is what I'm passionate about in my real life. I really like talking about like viruses and sickness and things like I wanted to be a doctor. I'm now going to be a lizard doctor. It's a little bit different, but like I am big into anything I can pull into the real world a little bit. And something I've been totally fascinated in learning about is like the medical world inside Star Wars and all the terrible things that can go wrong in your body when there's a gajillion different species and a gajillion different planets and contaminants and that is a passion project of mine for sure.
Do you have a favorite virus?
Oh God!
No, I mean favorite virus to speak on or talk about versus
spreading
it. The Rockghoul, right?
Yeah, probably Rackle. The problem is that it doesn't. What? Yeah, Rackle. Well, the Rackle plague is a virus. Yeah. Okay. The fan favorite is the Blackwing virus because it's like the traditional zombie virus. Everybody wants to talk about that. I would say the Rackle plague is my personal favorite, which is again an Old Republic thing. But it's funny because now that this is like my area of expertise, when I'm watching stuff or reading stuff, whether it be Legends or canon, I pick up on stuff that maybe other people like goes right over their head. So if there's a name drop for like a medication or some kind of virus or illness or something like that, I pick it up immediately. Like or just in general, like in the Book of Boba Fett, Cad Bane makes a passing comment to the mayor about the fact that as an Ithorian, he has two stomachs. And I picked that up and I never forgot it. And I'll bring that up to people and they're like, oh, I don't remember that. So it's just kind of interesting how that informs my consumption of the material now. But yeah, the Rackle plague they should bring that into canon. I mean, if they can bring the Blackwing virus into canon, they can bring the Rackle plague.
I think it is canon. I think we've had a mention of Rackle, and a plague that used to be on Terrace. It's the same thing as like Revan is now canon by name. It's like they have these offshoot references to this thing. So I think I might have to look it up again, but I do think the plague is at least bare minimum by name. a thing in history.
The more
So definitely what we need more in Star Wars right now is plagues, because that's not, that has no real world implications at all now.
The latest thing, and I will say this isn't a spoiler, so to speak, but Sawyer would be very interested in something that's upcoming that is parasitic. It would be really interesting to get her take on it. So read Cataclysm when it comes out.
Oh, all right. That's next month, right? Doesn't it come out? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you got Sawyer like, wait, what?
What?
3 days? Is it 3 days?
No, I
Oh.
I will be reading it soon. Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks. Yeah. See,
I need to be able to
I'm very fortunate that I do have that, but the problem is they send them to my mom, and I don't live with my mom, so like every once in a while she'll send me, "This book came for you," and I'm like, "Give me that right now."
So I'll
get back to you on that story.
I mean, my whole hope with being an influencer is to get the stuff early. I want the stuff. Give me the stuff, Star Wars.
Hey, you can get there.
Yeah, it's a goal. Someday, little by little. So speaking of legends to canon, and the fact that we have a Mandalorian going on right now. I was seeing an interview with Dave Filoni recently. And about how he talked about when George wanted to bring Mandalorians into the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, George did not care about the EU really, but Dave did. But as far as from Legends to canon now, as far as what they've done with Mandalorians, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's great. One of the things that a lot of people kind of gloss over is that Disney has brought more legends into canon than George ever did. We have Thrawn. We have we have so much legends material that has been adapted to canon and canonized under Disney that they should be thanking Disney. And I know it's a tough sell to get people to say, "Hey, thanks Disney," but it is true. We have so many things from legends and canon now, and what I love about the Mandalorians is that it's such uncharted territory that you have to wonder what they're going to keep and what they're going to bring in, because there's a lot about even like genesis of the galaxy, really, that comes from legends that it hasn't been explored in canon, and therefore it is a blank slate. So if we're talking about Neutron, which is what Coruscant used to be, and where the Tong and the Shell came from, where that turned into the Mandalorians, are they gonna do that? I mean, they said Tong's Day, and then they have Shell Day, so a lot of that stuff that's legends could potentially just one-to-one transfer to canon, and it's an interesting prospect to think about. What are they going to do with the mythosaur? Are we going to get like a canonized taming of the mythosaur in contemporary times? Because we have it in canon history that it was tamed by Tar, but are we going to get to see one on TV where like Grogu or Din or Bo-Katan, even someone on live action is going to tame a mythosaur? That prospect is absolutely incredible.
I mean, I just want to see a mythosaur and a rancor side by side taking on some sort of big bad, just that would be a sight. Sawyer, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, just like Element said, people get so wrapped up in this idea that they hate Disney Star Wars and Disney ruined Star Wars and all of this stuff, and they got rid of canon, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't even stop to breathe for a minute and take a look at all of the things that Disney is actively acknowledging. When it comes to Old Republic stuff, a lot of that has appeared in the High Republic, and it's not just your average, like, oh, Revan's canon and name. Like, there are elements like Tong's Day that imply that this idea of the Tongzhou War might be canon, and the Tongs were the original Mandalorians. I personally feel that was very intentional that they went with Tong's Day, especially because Filoni is a fan of the EU. They could have picked any other day of the week to say that, right? You know, it should have been Prime Day because that's the first day of the week, I think. And
I'm not sure. I have to look it up.
yeah,
I don't know.
Prime, Gel, Tong, Sentex, Bendu. I'm a nerd. Anyway,
Not a lore master, Jesus.
but with this is this comes up. This is relevant. I'm going to tell this story because it comes up every so often, and it fits perfectly here. In my earlier days, when I was using the term lore master, and I was very heavily making content about the Old Republic, somebody who felt very jaded about Disney Star Wars said to me, Sawyer, doesn't it offend you that they've gotten rid of all of this amazing Mandalorian lore and replaced it? And this person was referring to the Old Republic Mandalorians, because there is a lot of Mandalorian lore in the Old Republic, both in the games, the books, the comics. There is so much Mandalorian stuff there. And I just thought that was ridiculous, because I can have my legends and I can have my canon and I can enjoy them both, and sometimes they overlap. Well, in this season of The Mandalorian, they're adding some of that Old Republic Mandalore stuff in, and who knows what they're going to add next, right? Like, sure, last week's was more of a little like, oh, here's a crumb for you Legends fans. But this week, am I allowed to talk about this week?
Let's give our little spoiler warning for people. I think we're about that time. We've been going for a little bit. So this is your spoiler warning for this week's episode of Mando. You know, if you need to go watch it now and then come back and watch this later, drop a like and you know, subscribe and all that good stuff. So you've been warned. All right.
Cool.
Action.
And this is what I'm going to talk about in my video today, because when we were doing our reaction last night, I was like, oh my gosh. In Knights of the Old Republic 2, you encounter a character that have you played the games? Have you played KOTOR 1 and 2?
I played part of it.
Okay.
I didn't finish either of them, but yeah.
Do you mind if I talk about what happened?
Oh, please.
Okay.
You started it and you were like, be honest, you started it and you're like, what is this combat system? I can't.
That's really what gets me. Like, 'cause I was going back years later to play it versus like when it came out. So yeah, maybe I'll get to it, but go for it.
I think
I know a lot of the
are good, but anyway, having said that, I played it first without a mouse on a laptop, and then I played it on a Switch, and it's much better on the Switch. But anyway, in one of the main guys that helps Revan do his thing is a Mandalorian that Pep hates called Candris Ordo, and he becomes Mandalore. And in the second game, you meet up with Mandalore, and it's that guy, and you meet him at his base camp, and he and his brethren teach you. One of the side quests that you can do is you have to learn how to train like a Mandalorian, and there's all these rules that they give you. There's a judge. The challenger gets to pick the weapon. You can only use that weapon that the challenger states. You can't do any other thing. You can't use, if they pick darts, you can only use darts. You can't use the force. You can't use kicking, fighting. You can only use that one thing. And then 3 hits and you're done. And that is exactly what we saw yesterday. And that was the first depiction that we've seen. And that is like word for word the same exact structure of the ceremonial training. And I was like, this is so cool, because there's some stuff in Legends that is totally ridiculous and cannot be brought into canon for good reason, but then there's stuff like that, and it's like, see, they are paying attention and they do care, and you guys are impatient and annoying. Yeah, I don't know. That was like a huge win for me and it's always, that's how we look at it. Whenever there's a connection like that, it's like, hey, I know that, and now I can love it even more. So that's my add to this conversation.
Well, it's they do so well with the live action, especially the shows where they layer it. Where you're watching Grogu like jump around and like use like Mando darts, and to anybody just watching, not knowing the lore, like that's perfectly entertaining. But then of course there's that whole other layer, like just like last week with Tong's Day. Like people went nuts who who know their reference, but everybody else, they're just kind of enjoying the scenery. But there were a lot of complaints from last week.
I think we have to address George R. Binks.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. How many times how many comments have mentioned George R. Binks? Spanning that?
1, 2, 3.
I'm so sorry. Wait, what's the question again?
I'll bring it up.
The canonicity of George R. Binks, and does she think he should? I do think he should be made canon. I do think George R. Binks should be canon. Yes, I think it's a tragedy that Disney has not mentioned him by name.
Can you explain who it is?
George R. Binks is Jar Jar's father, and George R. Binks tries to off himself because Jar Jar is his son, and he simply can't put up with Jar Jar being Jar Jar. But then he misses, and then he's especially sad because he has to deal with Jar Jar still. This comes from a one-off comic. It's quite something. I Google it. He was my Discord server mascot for a little bit. So. Thank you, Lewis.
But of course, that actually brings us to this week's kind of topical aspect of Who Saved Grogu, which it's I don't think they could have done that better. I think that if you don't know, it was Ahmed Best who played Jar Jar Binks in the original
not
prequels.
Jar Jar.
No, Jar Jar, yes. But of course, the character that they brought in is actually, so they brought Ahmed Best to do a kids show. Is it Jedi
Academy?
Jedi
Academy,
Challenge?
something like that. Yeah, it's something that regard. It's on YouTube. I watched the first couple episodes. It's fun. It's fun, like little kids, like they go through these little challenges and obstacle courses and stuff. But of course, his character in that is the same of the same name that they brought in for this. So we already had the character and the name, but now it's canon. But the fact that he came in and saved Grogu, I like when I saw it, I'm like, well, there was no better answer. It's not something I ever thought of, but I don't know. I think that got most people on the internet. A lot of people with comments that they had to kind of like just pause because they were in tears.
It was a great moment for the Star Wars fan base as a whole to see, because we had spent like a year and a half speculating on who could have rescued Grogu, and we had all of these options. And if you know me, it's always been Quinlan Vos, and you don't expect that to be the case. But if there is any other alternative other than Quinlan Vos, for me, that was the one, because it was totally unexpected, and it's such just desserts for Ahmed Best to get this opportunity to be not only to be kind of reinvigorated in the narrative of Star Wars, but also to have a chance to be much more involved in the overall canon of the story, and I absolutely loved it.
And of course, like with that reference to George R. Binks, it's I have to enunciate that. And of course, like Ahmed Best just got incessantly bullied, like when the prequels were out, you know, and to that so much so, and I know some of you know this, but just to put that out there is that like he, you know, contemplated suicide, like that's. And so that reference and bringing him into this, I don't know, just meant so much. Like we've got Hayden back, we've got you know, we've got Ahmed Best in this Jedi role, like wielding two sabers, which is awesome.
Yeah, I like to think the bullies that really did a number on Ahmed were the clones, and that was his chance to deflect the attacks and get them good for finally.
And it was a nice extended scene too. It was
no, they gave him his minute. He deserved every minute of every second of that. And you could tell he was having so much fun with it too. And yeah, I mean, it was a surprise to all of us, and I think it's one kind of kind of a what's the phrase I'm looking for here? Yeah, kind of a slap in the face to the people that thrive on all of these. They need major cameos to make their storytelling. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? So this was a cameo, and but if you're one of those people, chances are you're also one of those people that have largely written off Disney Star Wars, so you wouldn't even know who this guy is, but it is a cameo. But the other thing too is, like, I am not a cameo person. I feel very much like if the character really serves a place in the narrative of this current story and can contribute something that isn't just, oh, I'm this character that everybody knows. That's okay to do a cameo. I do feel like sometimes these newer shows are oversaturated with cameos. This was perfect. This was a guy we've introduced to you before, but not a single person on the planet could have expected it. It was fun. It made perfect sense when you thought about it, and it added tons to the story because we knew Grogu had to get off the planet. We knew he had to get saved, and who better to save him than the guy who hosted kids challenge shows in the Jedi Temple. I love it so much.
It also doesn't close the doors on any of our speculations, because what it does for the Night of Order 66 is it presents a route for a lot of people to be saved. Now, when he says, I'm meeting up with a bunch of friends of mine, that could mean Quinlan Vos. That could mean all of our other speculations can come true. But that scene of Order 66 means that it was so out of nowhere, this kind of sacking of the Jedi Temple, that there was no organized effort to evacuate everybody. People were doing this piecemeal. They were like, oh my gosh, Grogu is right here, a youngling, get him to Kelleran. So if we can imagine on the other side of the temple, Gunji, who, spoiler alert for Bad Batch, also survived. On the other side of the temple, a whole group of other Jedi Masters, like, oh, get him to Quinlan, someone. A whole bunch of like people who survived Order 66 or who were evacuated from the temple piecemeal, just grabbing speeders and just going instead of having this organized evacuation, because we all know like the bulk of the younglings were in that room with Anakin. But if we imagine other younglings having survived, that's how it would have happened. Panic, grabbing the nearest youngling, giving them to the person who is nearest to this to a speeder. And so we have a whole bunch of different stories that could coalesce into this kind of mass exodus from the Jedi Temple, where we have Gunji, we have Katuni, we have the gathering younglings who were probably taken off by different masters, and then Grogu is just taken by Kelleran. And so we can still have fun speculating on how many other younglings survived, how many other Jedi were involved in taking 1 or 2 younglings at a time and trying to save them. It's fun.
Speaking of speculation, so of course at the end, getting off planet, we had the kind of the Naboo guards and the Nubian ship.
Is it J something?
I all I knew was Nubian. I wasn't sure of like the model. But is there any speculation on will we see more of that, or that's just going to be kind of one of those loose ends that we get to speculate about?
I'm sorry. It is. I was looking up the ship. I haven't found it. It's still a Nubian though. What was the question?
Oh no, just with the Naboo guards and the ship. Do you think we'll see more of that, or is that just going to be one of those loose ends that we never really get the answer to?
I think we will, and we have. So in one of the Vader comic runs, we see that Sabe is still out there trying to do right by Padme, and there's a group called the Amidalans that are trying to solve Padme's mysterious murder, or like the circumstances around her death. So there are a group of people from Naboo and people who served under Padme that are actively doing this stuff. Whether or not they're still around remains to be seen. But we could definitely see that happening in live action as well. Like even Chaco, when we were watching, was like, if we see Keira Knightley, like if we see another handmaiden just come out and like, hey, it's Grogu, and saves them, then that's just more story threads going off from the Jedi Temple to the handmaidens, to wherever. And like the fact that it was a Nubian ship, I was just like, they're going to Tatooine, and Quinlan Voss is sitting right where he was sitting in The Phantom Menace. He hasn't. Well, he did move. He went to Boss Biddy, but you know what I mean.
It always ends up
after
at
that, he went
Tatooine. Yeah, always ends up back there.
Well, I mean, it also makes sense if you read Dark Disciple, because ultimately Ventress, when she leaves all that stuff and becomes a bounty hunter, she meets Boba Fett in Tatooine. So it's like that place is just like, it's just like a breeding ground for people to just become things. Boba Fett's there now.
I'm curious your thoughts on Bo-Katan and Bo-Katan's development. Like we kind of see over the last like few episodes what they're doing with the character. Where do you think it's going to go, and or what would you like to see it go?
I was not a Bo-Katan fan until recently. And I always feel weird saying that stuff because like I don't like to be negative, but I never really liked the character until this season of The Mandalorian. And I don't know if that's because now I'm finally understanding her character, or whatever it is, I'm really enjoying the arc that they're bringing her along for. And I also am really enjoying kind of the double entendres of the titles of this season's episodes, as well as just the title The Mandalorian in general, because now I saw something on Twitter today, like, what is this show even about anymore? It's about Mandalorians. It's about this one Mandalorian over here, and this other Mandalorian over here, and this group of Mandalorians they're hanging out with, and this baby Mandalorian that they're raising, and like, it's about Mandalorians.
3 Mandalorians walk into a bar.
But it's very clear. This episode was so interesting for her because last week she kind of begrudgingly was welcomed into this community that she had such, distaste for because of their origins. We don't know definitively how Death Watch evolved into what would eventually be, the Watch. But there is connection there, obviously, and she was hesitant. She had every right to be hesitant, and I think last week she was a victim of circumstance. Her home got destroyed. She needed somewhere to be, and the last thing she needed right now was to be outed from the only group that was available to her. So she said, okay, this is the way. Yeah, I'm not going to take my helmet off. But then this week, she's respected immediately by everybody. She's treated as the warrior that she has always known she is. She's respected by Paz Vizsla, of all people, who should be the last person to show her any kind of respect. And then she saves his son, and it's like all this stuff, and she like it's I think she's really starting to understand that throughout history, whether or not they go deeper into what we know from the Old Republic or not, the Mandalorians have always been weakest when they're not banded together, because their culture is so involved in family. And I think in this episode, we saw her kind of connect those dots and realize that if, because at the end of the day, she wants Mandalore to be united. I don't think necessarily she wants herself to be the one to do it anymore. She just wants to see her planet and her identity and her culture be united again. So I think this journey she's on right now, she's understanding that there's got to be some compromises, and there is a way. Maybe this exactly isn't the way, but there is a way, and maybe she can figure it out with them. So that's my thoughts on Bo-Katan right now. I'm really, really loving her journey right now as a character.
Yeah, everything she said.
I mean, this is the first time Bo-Katan's getting any actual real story arc versus just being a piece of how things happen on Mandalore and Concordia. Like, when we first meet her, she was just always kind of like the angry soldier. That's how it's presented. It was very kind of like two-dimensional, but now we're finally getting focused on this character, which it's been it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I mean, she's been one of my favorite characters since she saved Obi-Wan in The Lawless, and it's one of those complicated characters that you don't know what they're about. But going back and watching the Clone Wars after seeing these episodes, you're kind of just like, she's trying to find a way, as Sawyer puts it, a way, a belonging, a cause. And she thought the Death Watch was the cause until Maul killed her sister, and Maul tried to, enthrone himself on Mandalore. And that was her first cause, which is no outsider will rule Mandalore. And then we go on to like Rebels, and Sabine's looking for someone to rule Mandalore, and she still has that doubt. She's like, I can't, it has to be won by combat. And then she has so many people under her that are supporting her for the second time that Sabine presents the Darksabers. So she takes it. But ultimately, the history of Mandalore has led them to a spot where they are very weak. And I think the mythosaur served as a catalyst to kind of reignite her spirituality. Like, she is the traditionalist, and she is the history of Mandalore, whereas the armor is the spiritual leader. And the mythosaur was like, hey, here's your spirituality back, do with it what you will. And so I've liked to say this since our reactions, that I think Bo-Katan's not 100% sold on the idea, but she has found value in this concept, or this notion, acting as a way of uniting the Mandalorians again. So there's going to have to be some marriage there of ideas.
So the final shot of the episode is like that kind of pan of the mythosaur skull on the wall. Where do you think that's gonna? What are your kind of projections on what we'll see with mythosaur or Bo-Katan's focus?
I think that's going to be the marriage of ideas. I think the fact that she's seen one means that we have to accept that one exists, at least one, and that in the near future that one may very well be tamed. And the line from the armor saying the mythosaur is for all Mandalorians, so you can wear it, and I feel like that's like a foreshadow of like, okay, this thing is going to become like the symbol of the one clan of Mandalorians in the future. Like they're gonna reunite again, because in like the old Mandalore there were no houses and clans. There was Mandalore, and then the Protectors, and then Mandalorians. So I think the future of the Mandalorians, whether it's Bo-Katan, Din, Grogu, whoever is ruling Mandalore, is to reunite under the mythosaur once again.
Do you have similar thoughts, Sawyer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we collectively we tend to agree on a lot of things. So, but yeah, I agree. Full. And I don't actually know that much about the mythosaur. That's not an area of lore that I have done much digging on or research into. So, I think that's probably all I could really say about it as well.
I mean, I don't even know how much canonically is actually out
Even
there
legends,
anyway.
though,
Yeah.
that's a gap in my knowledge for sure.
I have a kind of a side question for you, Sawyer. Because I decided like, oh, science and fiction, like it'd be a fun little topic today. When you're doing your research, the fact that you're kind of diving into a world of Star Wars that uses both science and fiction and fantasy, how do you approach that and kind of categorize things, and like what is your kind of approach to Star Wars when you're dealing with science and the fact that there is that kind of fantasy element?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes it's just comes up because somebody brings something up to me and it gives me an idea, or sometimes I have to have kind of a conversation with myself about how I want something to go. For example, last night there were a couple different avenues I could take with the cloning conversation. Like there's two avenues to it. There's either do I focus on how this relates to the real world, or do I stay within lore and explain how the science works in the lore? Does that make sense?
Mm.
So that is a approach. So for example, the last year I was doing the biology of Jabba the Hutt, Jar Jar Binks, whatever species, that was all information provided to me by the text. Now I'm kind of switching gears a little bit and doing, how does this work? How can I make this fantasy, sci-fi, totally ridiculous scientific process make sense in the context of what science is really like? So, and that's more of a challenge, and I think it's more fun, because as much as it was fun to kind of chronicle and make like an encyclopedia, a digital encyclopedia of all the different species, now I can look at something like Zam Wessel, which was a topic that I brought up recently. And this was because of my dear friend Hannah, Discount Bo-Katan, who I'm sure everybody's very familiar with now if they weren't already before. Including Katie Sackhoff, which was amazing. I don't know if you guys saw, but Katie Sackhoff mentioned her in an Entertainment Weekly article. It's awesome. So
and reshared her video on
Instagram. She mentioned the video on in the article, which was super, super cool. But anyway, she called me up. We talk all the time, and she was like, "Dude." Because she's not a scientist. She sometimes has these questions about the lore, and she calls me, and she's like, she's like, what is the deal with Obi-Wan turning into Rako Hardeen? And I was like, oh my god, like, wait, I totally forgot about that. Like, that is such a polyjuice potion fantasy, like, not at all scientific, weird thing that happens in the Clone Wars. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Mostly because I don't want to think about that, because that was an incredibly cursed thing that happened, that entire arc. But I gotta look into that. Like, what is Star Wars passing this off as scientifically? And so I went to go look into that, and while I was thinking about it, I was like, wait a second, what about Zam Wessel? She also kind of does the same thing. She's a changeling. What does that mean? And so it's my process, as it were, nowadays is when I ask those questions and I go refreshing my memory about how these things happened and what the processes were, then I can look at that and go, okay, what is this like? Where did this come from? So in the case of Zam Wessel, instead of just doing like, let's talk about the biology of Zam Wessel, it was why does Zam Wessel's species have this ability? And when I was doing the research, they pass it off as basically the same. Her species, the Quadites, they're reptiles, right? And so they pass it off as the same science that causes chameleons to camouflage. And that is not how that works. But I can make a video about that because that is a thing in real life. So it's and that's just more fun to me because there's so many more possibilities there of like, okay, or in the case of the Reiko Hardin situation, like they call it, I don't know, facial transformation something, I don't know, it's literally Botox. Like that's what they injected him with something and it changed his face shape. Like, okay, I'm going to talk about Botox now. I can get a little more creative about how I'm making those connections. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. Just curious because you've got a world where things are very like relatable to real world stuff, and then sometimes it's kind of left field, and you're dealing with a world that has the Force and some mystical element. So how to like sift through it as a scientist brain, like what the processes are, I think is interesting.
That is the quintessential crossover between science and fiction.
Da, da, da.
I think my job would be a lot easier if I was a Star Trek biologist, but
I found it. J-type 327. I was right there with the J-type.
Oh. Sorry. I'm like, wait, what? Star Trek J-type?
Non sequitur.
Okay, got it. Yes. The Nubian ship.
Yeah.
This will be on the trivia tournament. I'm just kidding. No, not
I better study up.
You should. I'm telling you, take the quiz. I think you'll find it easier than you think. But okay. No, I'm not going to be doing, for anybody that's still watching or like is interested, we will not be doing season 3 of Mando or anything that's coming out. We're not doing books. We're not doing comics, like none of that crazy stuff. It's just movies, television shows. I am doing Bad Batch season 2, but mostly because most of it is out already. But this will not be on the test. Don't worry.
So yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Element.
Joel, I was just gonna say, stay tuned for Battle of the Dyads. Also, find your dyad. We're gonna have it's not announced yet, but Battle of the Dyads was announced. We were just trying to figure out the logistics.
So what is Battle of the Dyads? For those who don't know,
you're gonna have to find your dyad. Teams of 2, competing in a real fans wouldn't know format, which is actually. So, yeah, it's just gonna be teams of 2. 2v2. We will read incorrect statements to you guys, and you will have to find what is incorrect about those statements and say real fans would know.
Interesting.
This is the correction. A little
bit different. Can I compete with my cat?
With your cat?
Yeah.
Can your cat join a call?
Yes, if I hold her.
We'll say for now that cats and pets are classified as coaches, but you have to find a dyad or find a partner to participate. Because we found this format to be especially fun because we can get really pedantic with it. Whereas trivia questions, if they get really stupid, they're stupid questions. But these statements are pedantic purposefully, intentionally. And it really is up to the competitors to either know it or just be strategic with process of elimination. You know, it was like, oh, real fans would know that Luke wasn't there. And you're like, nope, that is incorrect. Oh, come on, there has to be something else in the statement, right? So it's like it's very interesting, and we're talking about what the prize of that would be, but um, we're also talking about like a meetup next year, which we are you know tentatively calling DICON because there's no celebration next year. We're gonna do like a 4-day weekend at Galaxy's Edge, either whether it's Disneyland or Disney World. It's still up in the air, but we're gonna have our own
Disneyland.
meetup.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
world. Gotta,
Dang it.
We're having the discussion. We're gauging interest because like a lot of people are missing out on Star Wars Celebration London, and they're not going to have a celebration next year. So we can host our own, not necessarily a celebration like on that scale, but we can have a meetup of a bunch of creators and friends and mutuals, and just hang out at Disneyland or Disney World and go to Galaxy's Edge together, plan some after hours stuff, karaoke. And an in-person battle of the dyads. It's gonna be some fun times. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
listen. I know you go to Disneyland all the time, but you know what that means?
Not that often.
Okay, more often
Not
than most
me.
people. But
True. Yeah.
there is a lot of new stuff at World that you have to experience.
That's true.
We just got 2 new roller coasters. And what else did we get? Some other cool stuff, but that you don't have in Disneyland. Give it a try.
I know. I've been meaning to visit World for a while. I haven't been there since I was 13. But it's just I live down the street. I know I live down the street from Disneyland, so it's so convenient. It's like it's there, and I can sleep in my bed. It's perfect.
Yeah, but you have Mission Breakout. We have Tower of Terror, the original, and Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rerun, which is the best roller coaster I've personally ever been on. But
I'm 30 minutes out, but I haven't been to Galaxy's Edge yet, which is weird in and of itself. But
I got you. I know all the things.
And never mind. I won't say that.
So go ahead. All right. For those of you, I know there are people in the chat, but so you've got now 2 games you can join in on. So there's the dyad. You find your other half and compete in the dyad, and of course you've got Sawyer's trivia, where you can go on and take a little quiz to pass that. And of course, Sawyer, it's in all your bio stuff, right? It's pretty much links are in there.
I think Pep is gonna message me and hook me up with something easier, but yeah, it's at the top of my link tree on any social media you follow me on. It's right there in big bold. Take this quiz.
Also, we do Real Fans Would Know weekly as a segment on Dyad, and this week is the Andor edition. So,
and that's on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah. And we take live calls too. So if you ever want to participate in that, get your feet wet with the Real Fans Would Know format, you can always call in live, and we'll set you up. This week we're having Olivia Lupe Marie and Discount Bo-Katan, who is the one that chose Andor as the format. Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised. Okay. Didn't mention that.
And yeah. So if you have time on Saturday, come call in and get your feet wet with that. And there you go.
Awesome. Again, thank you both for joining me. I know I'm just like getting started here, and I appreciate both of you for coming on and bringing your expertise and giving your time to this. It's much appreciated. And Sawyer, you're not at Celebration this year, are you?
No, I'm so mad. Like, part of me, like, if the universe gave me a plane ticket, I was thinking about possibly like not telling anybody and just appearing for a couple days, but because I have a place I could stay, but unfortunately I don't think this can work out, so I will not be there.
Well, I hope to see you both in the real world at some point too. But again, thank you for coming on. Are there any last things you want to say or things you want to plug?
other than
Thinking about it.
Just Died in the Force. Battle of the Dyads coming soon.
Awesome.
And watch Mandalorian.
Read the High Republic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a
Read
good read. And
Catechism.
yeah, you've got a good like deep dive on all of that. So again, thank you very much, everybody.
Go
Thank you
to
all in the
sleep.
chat. What time zone is?
It's probably like 3 a.m. for him. He's in the UK.
Oh, geez. Well, we'll be in the UK soon, so yeah.
Also, yeah, just thank you for having me and us.
Yes.
You might just be starting, but we've been mutuals for a while, and I'm always down to talk Star Wars.
I love it. I love just getting together with people and geeking out and talking Star Wars.
Never mind.
1:30. Oh, that's right.
Stay awake.
It's a
daylight savings. Okay, yeah, you're good.
It's only a 7-hour difference from me, so that's not too bad. You're fine. It's before 2 a.m. You're good. But again, thank you, everybody. And thank you to the two of you for bringing some awesome stuff on here. I appreciate you. Of course, every 5 p.m. On Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Pacific, if you could drop a like on this video, it helps. And of course, subscribe. And of course, Dyad in the Force on Saturday. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you next week.